this is a significant drop back to sort of 1990s levels. So one way to look at it is 2 decades worth of education gains are wiped out, and the numbers are worse for poor and minority students. The drop is greater for the students who were already scoring lower.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with senior columnist Tim Carney. And Tim, we just got some pretty depressing numbers from the National Assessment for Educational Progress showing that there was really significant learning loss in some younger kids. Tell us about what we just learned.
Yes, so what they do is they test 9-year-olds and 13-year-olds. We just got the 9-year-old data, and it's the first time we have a real clean comparison from before the pandemic to now after, 2 years later, and it's a dramatic drop in reading and math. Now, we've been worrying for years that numbers had sort of stagnated. They'd stopped rising about 15 years ago, but this is a significant drop back to sort of 1990s levels. So one way to look at it is 2 decades worth of education gains are wiped out, and the numbers are worse for poor and minority students. The drop is greater for the students who were already scoring lower.
Teachers' unions, though, still seem to be using in-person learning as a bargaining chip. You know, in Columbus, Ohio, just this past week, the teachers broke a strike that had kept kids from going to their first day of school. I mean, do you think there's ever a tipping point where some of these teachers' unions will sort of recognize the long-term damage they're doing to public schools?
I don't think the unions will. I think what's going to happen, and has started happening, is Democratic politicians starting to realize that the teachers' unions are not acting in the best interest of the students, or more acutely, in the best political interests of these Democratic politicians. In D.C., Muriel Bowser tried to push the schools to open in fall 2020, and she just eventually gave up because she couldn't get the unions to bend. In Virginia, the teachers' unions cost Terry McAuliffe his election as governorship last year, and so you will see Democratic politicians running away from it. You will increasingly see other players in the media admit what they hadn't admitted. It wasn't the virus that caused this learning loss. It was the politicians with their school closures, even going into a year after the virus, that caused this learning loss.
What would that divorce look like? I mean, do you think the teachers' unions and the Democratic Party are just so intertwined at this point that it's even possible? Or
it would take basically either courageous or desperate Democrats to just say, look, I'm with you, but school closures is a losing position because it harms kids.
Shifting gears, finally, the Trump case keeps, developing by the day. This potential mishandling of classified information allegation that the FBI is looking into. Bring us up to speed on what we know and what we are still waiting to find out.
So it's really tricky because there's so much speculation, and there's people coming up with theories about, what was Trump going to do with these documents, and the documents are classified. So when we see them spread out by the FBI on the floor in a photo, we don't know what's in them, and that's the key thing that we don't know. We do not know what is in these documents. We've been told for years that there's an overclassification problem. So some of this could be really sensitive stuff. It could be, the name of some foreign spy, but more likely a lot of this is stuff that was classified for one reason or another, and it could have been declassified. So the classified realm is the realm of we don't know. It's the Presidential Records Act where it seems more clear-cut that Donald Trump took documents that belonged to the federal government. Donald Trump was a president. That didn't mean he owned presidential documents. The federal government did. He had these documents at Mar-a-Lago. So that's a more clear-cut situation. He took stuff that didn't belong to him. What we don't know is what was in it, and could it actually be harmful to the United States to be removed from secure facilities.
But if we're just talking about the Presidential Records Act, there have been other high-profile politicians that have had confirmed cases of violating the Presidential Records Act. Years of my life were lost to the Hillary Clinton escapade.
Well, and that would be the irony. The violations that Hillary did that arguably gave Donald Trump the White House, he then commits in sort of the dead tree version, removing the actual documents rather than what she did, where, again, people spoke about the classified documents with Hillary Clinton, but and a lot of that might have been overclassification. What was declassified? What was clear is that she was hiding her emails from the federal government and deciding to turn over on her own what to turn over, which wasn't her decision. It wasn't his decision under the Presidential Records Act to take these cartons of paper out of the White House and keep them at Mar-a-Lago. So we're kind of back where we were 6 years ago, just with the tables turned and a little lower tech.
Right, but just I guess my point is, do you think that the fact that these two cases have such stark similarities that there could be, if it turns out, and we don't know, like you said, about the seriousness of the classified information, that this could sort of fuel this anger at the potential double standard? Because
Yes.
Presidential Records Act violations are not typically treated like these big criminal cases.
No, and that's the thing. The FBI raid looks like something you would do to someone who is, stocking up an armory to to commit a crime, or who was sitting on pounds and pounds of cocaine, or who had really highly sensitive documents that could compromise somebody.
Yeah.
And so that's, if it does end up being merely Presidential Records Act, I think both sides are going to say there's a double standard because, again, this was how Trump got elected, was in part because Hillary violated this. But then again, Hillary, a lot of conservatives think she was treated with kid gloves. And we could go back in time and refight that 2016 all over again.
I personally love that. So, well, Tim, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more writing from Tim and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.